Okay, so please say your name and your title.
Hey, this is Jim Carson, Director of Engineering for Amphenol Antenna Solutions.
Great. Jim, as we move to 5G, what are some of the differences in antennas and what are some of the key characteristics?
Some of the key things that are going to be required from the antenna perspective is to allow the carriers to operate at a greater number of frequencies in an antenna. So densification through antennas with higher port counts is something that we've been working on for a couple of years, which will allow the operators to do carrier aggregation to provide more capacity and throughput to the customers. Another way that we've been actually working on improving to a 5G state is to offer multi-beam antennas or massive MIMO beamforming, which is another thing that is going to increase the capacity levels for the customers and the end users. You look at millimeter wave type of products, which is critical towards the 5G expectation of high capacity, low latency. And those are going to involve everything from the small cell antennas to macro style antennas to allow for the 1,000 times requirement for 5G capabilities.
What does densification mean in terms of the network?
Densification is going to mean they're going to put in, say, 5 times the amount of antennas inside of a given spectrum that used to be covered by one simple site. This can be done through a number of ways, through small cell antennas, through massive MIMO antennas that are all going to be joined back to a centralized node, which can then take the antennas and work them together to create beamforming of their own to improve throughput.
So you mentioned, talk a little bit about the HeadNet, like you mentioned different frequencies. Talk about what a heterogeneous network, a HeadNet is,
okay,
and how important the antenna is to operate.
Okay. Well, some of the frequency spectrum that is in play today in the United States, let's say, is in the 700, the 800, AWS, PCS spectrums. The operators have opened up the 600 megahertz, which has been purchased. The addition of 600, 700, 800, AWS, PCS, CBRS, LAA is all things that are going to allow the wide variety of frequency spectrum to be used by different operators so that they can put a lot more data through a lot more bandwidth, which means more data to you quicker so that you can upload and download at a faster rate.
What are some of the most exciting trends that Amphenol is participating in?
Some of the most exciting things that we've been working on lately are the existing market in infrastructure has given the expectation that certain antennas fit a certain form factor. So one of the challenges for us is to be able to take that same form factor and increase the capacity 2x, 4x, whatever we can do inside of that same form factor to give to the operator so that they can then in turn be able to offer a lot more capacity to the customer without having to go back to zoning and change their site requirements or their loading requirements for the site. As well as working into multi-beam antennas, working on tracking the user so that you can actually have the capacity you're looking for the next generation.
Explain MIMO.
MIMO. All right, MIMO is using a system of tracking multiple inputs to actually give a higher throughput by the fact that instead of the old days, you had to have a coherent signal on a single set of polarizations or a single set of spatially diverse antennas, where MIMO actually uses the diversity or the spatial timing difference between multi-ports to actually recreate a greater signal throughput. And you go, today's typically a 2 by MIMO, but we can go up to 64 MIMO. Easily we're adding in antennas 4 by capability for transmit and receive. The next steps will be 8 by capability as well.
So make a statement, how MIMO relates to 5G.
Well, 5G is a very diverse requirement from our end of the spectrum. Again, we're looking at more of the capacity and throughput. Higher orders of MIMO are required to be able to put more data through spectrum that exists as well as through the additional spectrum that is going to be added. All right.
So that's
Well,
it.
great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'll send you when we have one done. Okay, say your name and bold title.
Okay.
Say it twice.
All right. How you doing? I'm Chris Pleibel with the Pennsylvania Wireless Association. Let's start that one over again. How you doing? This is Chris Pleibel. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Wireless Association, and I'm also the director of sales for Perfect 10 Wireless.
Okay, and then say once just the Pennsylvania Wireless Association.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Chris Pleibel. I'm the presiding. Oh no, I'm the president. Let's start all over. Anyway.
Again.
How you doing? I'm Chris Pleibel, the president of the Pennsylvania Wireless Association.
Okay, so talk, what does Pennsylvania Wireless Association do and how many members do you have?
We hover around 2,000 members in the Pennsylvania Wireless Association. Unofficially, we're the second largest association in the country behind California. We're going to get you, California. And we started approximately 11 years ago with a handful of members. And let's start that one over again. So the Pennsylvania Wireless Association started about 11 years ago with a handful of members and board of directors. And currently today we hover around 2,000 members. We are just behind California, unofficially the second largest association by membership, and California, we're coming to get you.
What is the State Wireless Association for? Say
So we're supported by WIA, and
we're part of the State Wireless Association program from WIA.
Okay, I got you. The Pennsylvania Wireless Association is the. See, I'm confused. No. So we're affiliated with, or we're. Help me out. Pause for a second. The Pennsylvania Wireless Association is one of the 37 states that are organized under the WIA. The WIA has been extremely supportive from resources, speakers, providing direction for trade shows, providing direction for fundraising efforts. It's just been a great relationship over the years.
Talk to me a little bit about what your company does and what are your primary, what are the hot products you're striving towards 5G, something like that?
Okay. So on my paying job, I work for a company called Perfect 10 Wireless, and we have recently created a new mounting solution to handle the new 5G technologies that are coming in the future, currently as well. Anyway, I work for a company called Perfect 10 Wireless, and we've recently created a new antenna mounting solution for towers and monopoles. It's called the Life Mount, and this Life Mount can handle pretty extreme cases of RF vertical load. This will be able to help the 5G deployments go faster, less money on mount modifications spent. That doesn't sound right either. Can we pause for a second? Are you?
Nothing you say will be.
All right. So
say it like this, 5G is driving this, and one of the aspects that's key is, don't
Okay.
say you sell, just say it. And then
Gotcha. All right. So currently 5G is driving pretty extreme load cases on existing mounts on macro sites. And this demand on the marketplace and this strain on the existing mounts and towers has driven us to create a new product called the Life Mount. This should be able to deter a lot of mount modifications and allow for future capacity to go on macro sites.
Small cell, or what's this?
We do. We do a lot of small cell antenna mounts. We've created some mounts that can go onto wood poles and existing structures, utility structures, to be able to support the small cell CAN antennas and help that deployment of the 5G technology at that level.
Say something about small cells growing rapidly.
Small cells are not small. Actually, they're very large in the antennas and the radios, but also very large in the numbers. The sheer number of deployments that have taken place historically pale in comparison to what's coming down the future, especially with the 5G technology that's looming in the future.
Say your name and title and company.
Fabian Huber, Market Manager WDM, Huber and Sooner.
Really. Talk about the trend to densification. What is that and what's it affecting?
Densification for us basically means that the optical layer, but also the RF layer, needs to be much more, more dense in the sense of more capacity in fewer fibers and more bits through the air. That's the RF part of it, but I'm focusing personally more on the WDM, the optical part. And therefore densification for us really means more capacity at lower latency through as few fibers as possible, and therefore basically reducing the cost of the infrastructure.
How important is fiber optics to 5G?
I would say it's very important. It provides much more capacity than anything else, and at much lower latency, since latency is critical for 5G. I would say it's very key, but obviously it's also very costly, so I think there is a very difficult trade-off between putting more fiber and doing things wirelessly. Backhaul is also possible for 5G, but I'm sure every carrier needs to find his own trade-off. I'm personally focusing on the fiber optic part, and therefore I'm interested to sell the optical.
Talk about the trend to small cells. What's that about, and how fast is it growing?
How fast is it growing? That's a bit a difficult topic, but the small cell itself, I would say, is very key to just add more capacity to an existing network. And it naturally ties into the whole densification process of a carrier. And we have solutions there to densify and to promote and to install those small cells very efficiently, very quickly, and in a flexible way, so it's easy to do. And therefore I think small cells is a key aspect of our offering and of the 5G world in the future.
And what's a distributed antenna system?
What it is what it says. It's distributed antennas inside the building, but also outside. I would say it's also part of the densification process. It needs to be added much more into the network, but that's not my personal focus, so I can't really add too much there.
That's actually about the trends of small cells and densification?
So overall, with small cells, especially within the carrier space, is that everyone's starting to realize capacity is the biggest issue. We already have pretty decent coverage here within North America. So the idea is how you download some more speeds. So instead of having these large macro cell environments, you have to do something a little bit more consolidated, hence the small cells, which are going to be a smaller form factor, sit on top of light poles, telephone poles, etc. It allows you to pinpoint your needs instead of having to broadcast out of much larger areas.
So 5G is a trend that's coming, and it's going to help influence things such as the smart city and all those type of applications. Mention a little bit about what's the role of the antenna in that?
So within 5G, the antenna really is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. The idea wrapped around with 5G in general is just to add a lot more capacity in various different ways, whether that is massive MIMO, whether that is utilizing additional frequency ranges, whether it's dealing with potentially higher frequency ranges we haven't in the past. You're going to need antennas to do this. This is how you get your radiation sources out to the world. And with this, you'll be able to get all the capacity you need back in your network. So when you start talking about HetNet or heterogeneous networks overall, it's all these different types of technologies, how they work together. Where you're talking a small cell, macro cell environments, street connects, those type of things. You have to start integrating all these environments together. It's no longer a silver bullet with this. You have to start utilizing new antenna technologies to meet the expanding needs. Literally in today's world, demand is completely outstripping supply, and you need to be able to utilize a complete network solution.
Talk a little bit about concealment and aesthetics in terms of telecommunications gear, antennas, etc.
So when you have to start deploying, especially small cells or things that maybe are a little bit closer to you, or you have a lot more of them, aesthetics become a part of an issue. You really want to make sure that this is an environment that you like to be around. So you have to start utilizing aesthetics in regards to your small cell deployments, whether it's more concealment on light poles, or maybe it's a color exchange, or it's some sort of a manipulation of the antenna to fit into its surroundings. This is going to be very important. You know, permitting and doing site acquisition is going to be one of the #1 issues that you have to deal with the small cell environment. And as long as you can address it up front, everyone's going to be a winner.
I'm Peter Tokar, Economic Development Director for City of Alpharetta.
Okay, so Peter, talk to me about what's the vision for Smart City Alpharetta.
Sure. Alpharetta is very interested in information of things and smart cities in an attempt to better serve both our businesses and our residents from an IT perspective. And that involves increased connectivity, better management of roads, public safety applications, and just generalized solutions for a better living in a better community.
So, which technologies are you focusing on to help drive the vision?
So some of the technologies that Alpharetta is looking at to help provide better solutions for connectivity within the city is things as general as parking applications for the new parking decks that we're building, so that we can provide a better solution for easy parking when we have some festivals and events that we have downtown. But anything from parking to things like traffic cams and increased circulation within the city to move people around the city better and ease congestion.
So what's the value of PPPs? Is that something that you're seeking to strike?
Sure. The public-private partnerships play a big role in how we're looking at our IoT and smart city strategy. The vendors that we're looking at partnering with are the ones that are leading the industry in these types of initiatives. So to have them as partners and to be leading with them is really keeping us ahead of the curve rather than just trying to figure it out by ourselves.
And do you have, are there a lot of resources available, or are you driving the train?
We have a lot of resources available to us. Since we have an abundance of tech companies in Alpharetta, we don't have any shortage of partners that are willing to step up to the table to assist us with these initiatives.
Have you named any officially?
None yet, no.
Well, Bill implies. Talk to just a couple of your favorite topics around.
That could be very broad.
Well, relative from a tech perspective to the program you're driving, some bullets. You said a bunch. Mm-hmm. I like to get the second statement sometimes.
As far as IoT goes?
IoT, yeah, if you use IoT in the start of the sentence, that would be good, because we didn't really talk about that.
Okay. So Alpharetta is pursuing a lot of different initiatives in IoT, specifically around better connectivity within the city for things like parking, things like traffic congestion and relief, all the way to providing applications for getting bike share programs to go through our community trails and connect between shopping destinations, business destinations, and residential areas. And we're utilizing a lot of our local partners to help craft that message and craft the vision of what that's going to look like for the future.
And from a quality of what you see this improving quality of life in the city?
Absolutely. So implementing different objectives and initiatives within IoT and smart cities will have an incredible benefit on the quality of life for the residents and businesses in Alpharetta. The better connectivity that we can provide just means better connectivity to different events, different businesses, different opportunities that lie within the city and within the companies.
We're merging 38 different silos into one. We want to start running the state and IT like a business. We're focusing a lot in cybersecurity. We've been, over the past, couple months, we've been attacked, and our team has been on it very well. For example, the Department of Veterans Affairs, they got attacked a couple months ago, and even though it was, they got us good, basically through emails, but we also learned from it very well, and now and we recovered from it without basically anyone really knowing. As well as, you hear about the Legionnaires outbreak that happened last year. We were able to use some of those solutions. Well, you used a problem, and then, for example, the Chicago Med Home that they're building for the vets, we were able to implement sensor technology in the water detection in the building that's being built, and then we can now track if Legionnaires is, coming through that home, as well as, monitor our water usage, et cetera, in the building. That was kind of off track for a little bit, but forgive me, I'm a little nervous. But
You're not getting sick.
no, I'm not sick yet. Yeah. So I'm gonna go through our whole Smart State program. So basically, back 2 years ago, we were ranked in the bottom quarter in the Digital State Survey, and just recently we are now in the top third. And coming up, which I'm actually in charge of, proving our case in the next 6 months. Next year they're going to be surveying us again, and we're hoping to get top 10, top 5, hopefully.
Are you guys submitted to be in the Smart Cities program in 2018 with Smart City Council? Are you going for that? You know, if the state has got anything like Chicago or any of them going?
I don't know yet. Do you know Stuart and Graham and all them at Smart Cities?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we keep in constant contact with them, so I'll actually bring that up. But
for the combination of city and state that are cooperating well.
Yeah.
There aren't a ton of those.
No. So we basically, from the December workshop, came up with 9 initiatives over 3 platforms. So here's the Smart Technology platform. You have the Internet of Things, mobile and data-driven government, and converging technologies. So built environment IoT, you're looking at, the frontline wins that we can apply, whether that's, sensors in buildings, et cetera. Mobile, we're getting much of what the state does on your phone. If you want to go to a state website, it should be a mobile-enabled web page. When we first came in, none of that was really happening at all. As well as every agency is now basically required to come out with at least one app. So I don't know if you guys heard, but there's an app called Illinois First. If you download it on your smartphones, I recommend it.
Has anybody done that? There we go, 1, 2. Okay.
Oh, great! That's good to hear.
That's probably good hit right.
So through Illinois First, you basically it compiles all the apps that's going on in the state. So you only have to download one app, and you could basically get to wherever you need to go. Converging technologies, AI, blockchain. Illinois right now, I don't know if you guys know, is a leader in blockchain efforts and bringing blockchain to the state of Illinois. So we're pretty far along with that. Our IoT, we're getting there. Mobile, we're doing really good. Let's see. I'll get into some of the initiatives right after this too. Streamlined business platform so we're partnering with DCO, provide a springboard online that a business owner could go on and know exactly what to do to start a business in Illinois, which is actually a lot harder than a lot of people think. Vertical integration, we're doing some really cool things with data sharing amongst HHS agencies and municipalities. For example, data sharing to prevent. One of the initiatives is sharing health and human service data to help prevent recidivism. To reduce recidivism in a county in Illinois. So that takes time, no money. We're at the very early stages of it, but we have people constantly working on it. Smart policy and regulations. I'll get into this with our smart street lighting RFP, our master contract that we'll be having out. But basically cutting red tape. Our procurement process is so annoying as it is right now. Trying to reduce that, trying to make it easier for a city in Illinois or the state in general to get into a contract with one of you guys, etc. Let's see. This is our second platform, leading the nation while building the workforce for the future. So we're going into partnering with universities, outside help. We have IoT Talent Consortium. They put together a course list, basically, for free in Illinois, where you can go online, take courses towards IoT specific programs.
That's free to government employees? Or
Everybody, yeah. But at the end, you do have to pay for your certificate if you want it, but all the courses are free, for example. Smart State Model Replication. About this summer, our state CIO, Hardik Bhatt, he, partnering with NGA, went to DC and led about 8 states to replicate what we're doing in Illinois to the other 8 states. So we're trying to see how we could expand this across the nation. Future Ready. Wait, did I miss one? Oh no, sorry. Future Ready. Our digital government. Crossing, sharing assets and information across state between cities, infrastructure, data. This is on the broad network, but how we get ourselves future ready, for the next 10 years, but set it up now. So here are some of our initiatives that are currently ongoing in our smart technology platform. Our smart lighting. So we have a smart lighting procurement going on that we'll be awarding a contract soon. So the interesting thing about it is any municipality in the state will be able to purchase off this procurement at the rate that Chicago would get. So Sandwich, Illinois, to replace their streetlights could purchase at the same rate as Chicago would get if they were to replace streetlights. And with that initiative, we've been able to identify how we did that procurement, and we want to duplicate that across potentially smart buildings, smart waste management, municipalities, the same type of procurement platform. They could use that, and we could develop an RFP and then a master contract that now municipalities could then, purchase waste management bins at the same rate as what a Chicago would get across the state. Smart buildings, we retrofitted around 80 or so buildings with light occupancy sensors and smart lighting in the buildings that are 50-year-old buildings. We have a smart fleet program. We're getting there. We're seeing what's moving to leasing, or how can we apply sensors to cars that are in our fleet and see track data that on our own streets, because it's basically there's so many cars going to and from Springfield, for example, and across the state, caseworkers, you name it. So why not use those cars to our advantage and collect more data? Connected public safety. This initiative's kind of still on the new, but it's similar to what data sharing to help basically reduce recidivism, but as well as how can we protect police officers? How can we protect citizens?
Has that been part of this, or are they trying to help you? Is that something that?
Not yet, no. But now that you sparked it earlier to me, and I'll have to dig into that.
We'll help you. We'll help you bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's same thing with the smart lighting. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, are all aware of it. But we're gonna have workshops where we educate the municipalities on what they're buying and as well as show them what else they could do besides just putting an LED light up. They have sensors. They have that monitor traffic flow for both cars and pedestrians, as well as they can have a sensor up there that pinpoints where a gunshot happened, and then alert authorities a lot faster. We're doing a lot in transportation on I-90. I don't know if you guys are aware, but they're doing a managed lanes out there. So if there's an accident on the shoulder, there'll be every about quarter mile there'll be panels that are up, and they'll manage the lanes, as well as so if there's a police officer on the side of the road, he's got his left lane closed or the accident to the left, so prevents guys from flying by him, as well as throughout that whole I-90 on the tollway there, they're also collecting, there's sensors that are collecting data from the cars going by, from the state vehicles going by. So that's still new, and it's going live pretty soon, especially in the testing purposes. So I'm sure you'll see that, especially if you're from Chicago on I-90. And we want to apply that to all the other tollways toll roads, excuse me. So, but the I-90 is a good start and a good test. We got into mobile-driven government, using analytics across all these initiatives, as well as, getting everyone on your mobile device. Convergent technologies, we got into blockchain. We have a RFI out for AI. We would like to get into the chatbot space, with, if you go online, how do I renew my driver's license? Or you shouldn't have to call for that. You should, a chatbot could easily tell you what you need to do, or pinpoint, you go to the DMV, go here, this is what you need, etc. Customer service is a big thing across all these with the state and with the citizens. No one wants to be on a 45-minute wait time when calling and trying to contact a state agency. So we think AI and chatbot could be very useful in that space as well. So yeah, we kind of got into the springboard, cutting the red tape, smarter workforce. We have a partnership with U of I. We're trying to get partnerships across all agencies, leveraging their talent that they're building there, as well as how could they benefit us and us benefit them in the Smart City, Smart State platform. We are still very close with the NGA and Smart Cities Council. We have monthly meetings with all the initiative leads. So every initiative we have initiative leads that are the CIOs for the agencies, and they report to me and Kevin. And so they all come together, and we invite NGA and Smart Cities people in those meetings. So they get to get a live update of what we're doing in Illinois, as well as provide input if they think, oh, you know what, maybe you should talk to FirstNet, or so they exactly, and we're busy managing all initiatives, and it's easy to overlook something like FirstNet, for example, or so it's the more talking, the more connections we make with you guys, the better for us. And then making a digital economy, getting the state ready for future ready, etc. Let's see. Here's some of I kind of got into these updates right now. We're trying to do a lot in smart buildings. We have the support, for example, from the governor and the governor's office for this whole program. But problems you come in, I'm sure you guys have seen in the news, is funding. We finally have a budget, but there's, for example, no money allocated to this, so we have to think strategically. Public PPPs, apply for grants, that can help fund a specific project. Work with the municipalities that may have some funding. Someone do a pro bono for us if anyone's offering. But I'm trying to.
Introduce you to the fellow in Orlando. He's director of sustainability. Our mayor is an environmental engineer, so they've been at that for about 3 or 4 years now, and they've got, I think, 75% of the buildings online now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they've gotten way out there.
That's awesome. And that another thing, we have, I think, like 6,000 units of government in Illinois. So it's like we don't need to build any more new buildings. So we need to retrofit what we already have, put smart lighting in them, occupancy sensors, excuse me, monitor, the usage of, both water, electricity, etc. So we got to be smart in the way we manage our own portfolio, as well as, what the municipalities are doing, and etc. along that end.
So to really drive this, you're talking specifically about state of Illinois run organizations, right? State-run organizations, but to adopt it into enterprise, you got to get to the consultants, you got to make it code. You basically have to drive what we're trying to do here to really have an adoption.
Yeah.
Right? For it, but also you have this gap between, most RFPs come out and it says, show me an example of, give me 5 examples or 3 examples, but nobody's ever done this before. So how are you addressing that part? And then the talent gap of companies, products that want to, play in this space, but just don't have the ability to do that.
Absolutely.
How are you vetting that?
Excuse me. I can see how that could be, a problem. we're still, I guess, day to day, so because it's so new. So, but like something like that, that's a good conversation to have and keep having. You know, the city of Chicago, you know, all the startups that are happening here, why can't those businesses, you know, apply for an RFP? But you know, IBM is very well capable of probably winning that contract. So, you know, being open in our procurement process to the little guy in the room as well as, you know, the big shots, you know, making it competitive that way. So we could shape the, I guess, the procurement process or the RFP to that end to help, you know, what was the second part maybe? Talent, yeah, absolutely. I guess we have talent as in the city of Chicago that we could use and the universities, but you know, we also need to have, we're part of the Smarter Workforce is partnering with these universities to you know, offer IoT type of programs. You know, students could get certificates in, whether that's, you know, to fly a drone or et cetera along those lines, that they could then, you know, get hired quickly out of college for a type of need in the IT sector. I don't know. Yes, go ahead.
Sort of on that point, so we have a startup company here in Chicago, but we do vehicle-to-vehicle autonomous and smart city integration. But Michigan seems to have more of the test facilities for us. So like you were saying, you know, how are you supposed to do this if it's new?
Yep.
So we're actually bringing all of our tech constantly to Michigan, to their connected corridors, to the autonomous test tracks, to, you know, all the roadways they're working on. So is there anything in Illinois that's coming up? I know we're doing something in Chicago, but just something that the state is going to sponsor to say, hey, this is a connected corridor. It's not 50 grand to rent, but it's open for startups and other companies to use, just to be able to keep companies like ours here rather than always looking
Absolutely.
outside.
No, I actually do sit on the autonomous vehicle committee as well. They bring on, we have about 8 different agencies coming together. But that's the exact thing we want to do in Illinois, and we look to Michigan and other states because they're already doing it, and we're working with the governor's office to see, you know, could we do this through executive orders or legislation? Where can we, you know, have a corridor that they do testing at? Because we know that will drive businesses here. So we're exploring.
There were federal funds too, like in Florida and Michigan.
Okay.
Huge chunk.
And to do it quick, I know like the one in Chicago, I think it's like a 4-year plan that they're working on. I don't think it's, I've seen drafts, but I don't know if it's official yet. But like that kind of thing, and now you have sort of startups looking at, hey, let's combine our funds and asking investors, hey, we need money to actually go put this up in this test area within the city to do it on your own, and just to be able to have some of that state support to be like, great, here's some funds to be able to go do this and pull the right people together to put that there for the companies to utilize. Because then you could say, hey, we started sending data to these cars or to the smart infrastructure during this controlled test. So when you are answering RFPs, and if you are a startup, you can say, we use the track, you know, we all had access to it, and we're able to prove out our tech, and that's sort of the model that everybody can use. Or it just gives more opportunity rather than having to jump all the other stuff.
Absolutely, and we want to keep you here. We want you, doing it here rather than going to Michigan. So, I mean, IDOT, they're all over this, but they got to do it the strategic way. For example, there was a bill that was passed. It was called the Demmer bill. But, there was I think an alderman in the city of Chicago that wanted to ban AVs for like 80 years or something, and that prevented municipalities from doing that. So, the governor's office, our agency, IDOT, all supports what you want to do here. So it's just the hard part is, allowing for testing to get that going, I guess. But for example, I could connect you with IDOT people. We can, have a sit down. We could phone call, you name it, talk over, see what we can do, what you guys could do to support us, what we could do to support you.
I just one other comment, and it's also, with policy, smart city, autonomous vehicles, public safety, like they're all one thing.
Absolutely.
So it's just like, when I go to the, some of these organization people we talk to, it's like, okay, we're talking about autonomous, but can't really talk about that without the connected car and talking about policy within the city because it's shaping the policy, not vice versa. And then smart cities obviously involved because everything's going to talk to one another. So it's just having those right people together, I think, can really help drive like what the companies need because they're just not separated.
Absolutely, yeah. Another thing too, where there's things that we could do, like cutting the red tape, that we don't need the legislature's help for. For example, building standards too. If they are going to build a new building, well, these are the type of standards you need to have. You need to have smart lighting. You need to monitor their water usage, electricity, etc. So they build those buildings with IoT technology already in it, and they have no other choice but to do that. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Well, just two comments. The governor's politics and mine couldn't be further apart, but we agree on a few things, and this happens to be one of them that I'm really supportive of the governor on. So thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Two things. One is there is the Illinois Energy Code that's already been passed. You're required to do all of the things from a lighting retrofit perspective. We're in that space. We do it all the time. And you're absolutely right. The state of Illinois is really led in that regard. A lot of other states have not passed that kind of legislation before. And then the second thing, and I would just bring to everyone's attention, the state of Illinois is really open. I mean, they will work with anyone. And so if you're interested in working with the state, I commend you for coming today. And just wanted to mention, Argonne National Labs also is doing a lot with autonomous vehicles. And the last thing I just wanted to say is just in terms of the units of government, one thing the state of Illinois did, and I think it's a very important one, is they're really trying to help with 911 centers. This is a very big thing that every state should be doing and isn't. State of Illinois passed legislation to say that any city under, I think it's 50,000 people, has to consolidate their 911 centers. This is a critical piece of legislation that was passed in Illinois. It's very important that all of us as citizens
company headquartered out of here called US Robotics. I was very early in the stages of US Robotics, building dial access to the internet, broadband solutions, built some of the first wireless data access technology, we say back in the day. JMA is a global organization. We build technology in a lot of places you guys go today. In Chicago, if you go see a Cubs game, we'll be in there. If you go down to Navy Pier, if you go to Ravinia, if you go down to Tinley Park to see music, you'll find that somewhere in those venues, in many of the venues and buildings up and down Michigan Avenue, our technology is embedded in there. And you may not know it, but our technology is what gets built to go into these environments to enable connectivity. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about work we're doing on a vision for smart cities. And our work includes smart cities, smart buildings, smart campuses. It stems across many of these environments because there's a lot of reuse across them. And because we do a lot of facilities, both, and you mentioned in the buildings, because we know what happens inside of the buildings and we deploy thousands of those, we can use that technology outside the building. Because if you think about it, any given day, what happens in the city streets is they're very populated in the morning because people are going into those buildings. So those mobile devices they use actually move from streets to the buildings, back to the streets, and in the evening into the entertainment areas. So we think about that whole stream, that flow of individuals that need connectivity, and then how does that work in a very streamlined way. One thing we know is happening in the world of mobile wireless technology is there's more and more devices, right? You look at any number and the number of mobile devices are increasing. Now, the important thing with mobile devices is that the speed is going to increase dramatically. And today we think of connectivity on your mobile phone as pretty good, generally. When it first was introduced, we were celebrating the fact that we could get a mobile phone to connect at 64 kilobits per second. That was screaming fast when it was first coming out. You know, now, if you can get 64 megabits per second, 100 megabits per second, that's pretty good. But now we're going to start adding a G to that, right? And we're going to be talking about going gigs per second. So that's the stuff you need to think about. The other is devices. We all think of wireless as mobile connected phones, but what's happening is a lot of smart things are going to surround us. Hundreds of devices like smart lighting, smart sensors, all need to be connected in some way. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, some of you heard of this term called 5G out there. The industry talks a lot about 5G. If you ask 10 people, you get 10 different descriptions of what it is. And it's because it's under development in a lot of the standards. A lot of the ratification of standards around 5G probably won't be completed yet for a couple years. Now, what's important about 5G, right, this is an evolution of what you know today with 4G on your mobile phone, is that it cuts across a couple areas that are important to smart environments. One of them is Internet of Things. You're going to hear that terminology a lot, and it cuts across many different types of equipment, whether it's tracking vehicles, whether it's on parking meters, whether it's in parking spots. You're going to find a lot of different new devices that are connected through this wireless infrastructure. In the middle, you've got higher reliability connectivity services. So more often, your phone is connected with high data rates than not. So even though we have pretty good performance on our mobile devices today, you all recognize you get into some locations where strange things happen, right? And that can have to do with the way the coverage works. That can have to do with how many people are suddenly concentrated in a specific area. Those kind of things impact the utilization. And we have a lot of smart people in our organization, a lot of our smart partners that are here with us that really get deep into understanding how to address that with technology and deployment. On the left-hand side, then, enhanced mobile broadband. So we're really talking about bringing together things like Wi-Fi. So if you think of Wi-Fi today, it is a step in a process where you as a human have to make a decision to stop what you're doing, usually connect and approve through some portal to get connected to a device. The moment you go on the move, it's gone, right? And then you got to do the next step to connect. And what we're really doing is we're really bringing the Wi-Fi spectrum into the mobile cellular spectrum so the two work together transparently. Because what you really want as a human is that when there's more speed available, it just connects and all of a sudden you go significantly faster and you don't have to think about it. And there's new technologies coming in that realm. That's going to enable a lot of new applications, right? Our industry talks about video a lot as a driving application. If you use FaceTime, if any of you have kids my kids' age, they live and breathe on these video feeds all the time, and they consume mass amounts of bandwidth. When I look at the gigs my daughter consumes, now I know why. So it's a new area where we have an opportunity to really enrich the experience when it comes to real-time video. What are these technologies? Well, In the middle, you have something called LTE. You all see that on your phone. Sometimes we call it 4G. The importance of LTE today, and it's moving to something called LTE Advanced, is it'll get smarter at being able to take different cellular connections and bonding them together to increase your performance. When you go to the right, there's new things in the standards that are related to Internet of Things. One of them is called Cat-M1, right? A device that is sensing a parking spot doesn't need as much capacity, right? It's not streaming video. But you need to ensure that it's there, and you need to ensure that the device that's reporting the status of a parking spot is really low power, because ultimately you want these things everywhere and you want them to run for 10 years on a battery. All right? So when you get down into the right, these technologies, one called Cat-M1, one called NB-IoT, narrowband IoT. The real difference is how much data you can push across the different connections and how much power the device needs to transmit. All right? The other goal of these IoT technologies is that they're an integrated part of the same infrastructure that provides mobile cellular. Because ultimately, if we're going to create efficiencies that are smart, that means the technology that connects things needs to be common infrastructure. Right? So the more we can integrate these, the more streamlined it is. On the left-hand side, there's a couple technologies to know. One is called CBRS, Citizens Band Radio System. It is a federally approved set of spectrum, and it provides 150 megahertz of spectrum. So if you think of that in the context of what your cell phone uses today, typically you connect on a band that has 20 megahertz, right? Quite often even less than that, 15 or 10 megahertz. Now imagine the number of bits we can stuff in if I can start getting more bandwidth up to 150. So that's a multiplier effect right there. There's other technologies in there that, like I said, Wi-Fi is another aspect of it, where we tie that in, and then you get even more capacity as part of that. But think of this as the spectrum of things that in the wireless infrastructure side, we're working to address so that you can deliver all that into these smart environments as a set of common infrastructure. Now, I think we'd pretty much agree that all these smart things we're talking about end up being bits of technology that are sensors and controllers on devices around the city, humans connecting, and as a result of that, connectivity is pretty critical. I was in San Francisco at one of America's largest shows, Mobile World Congress, last week, speaking with the president of Sprint, and we're working on something I'll show you for New York City. They're working on launching a technology there where every police officer has a cellular connected holster for their gun. All right? When they pull that gun out, it automatically grabs GPS location, starts streaming multiple body cams to a central repository, and then what we're working on is a mechanism to allow that system to trigger other alerts to show you. So if you think about that kind of connectivity, it doesn't work very well if it's not connected, right? And when you're relying on it, right, to trigger actions, then it becomes even more critical. So this is where connectivity for us is really critical to think through very carefully. Now, when you go into the cities, there's a lot of ways to deliver critical capabilities, and one of the things we find as we work with a lot of cities is they go down the streets of technology that was delivered maybe not 45 years ago, but many, many years ago, early technologies, and you've got a lot of wires, you got a lot of different antennas. We were talking earlier, and I said if you go down to Randolph Street, where we spent a lot of money and design to create a wonderful streetscape in a theater area, you've got, and then you've got technology guys that want to hang coaxial cables on the side of those wonderful lights. It's not something the city's very interested in. And there are ways to solve for that, right? And Peter mentioned earlier an organization called Big Belly. I'll show you some things there, because Big Belly is a company that, believe it or not, That's what they build. They build waste and recycle stations. But they thought about it differently. They said, let's build one that's connected to the internet, and let's build a cloud-based platform that tracks each one of them and reports where and when they need to be serviced. Because we all know in the city, you probably have a lot of guys driving around emptying empty waste cans, because that's what they're paid to do. They've reduced the cost, the overhead of just waste management, waste and recycle management by 50 to 70% in the cities. It's a big number, all right? Now, what's important about that to us is not, yes, they're connected devices, they need cellular connectivity to be reliable, but that's not even the cool part. What's cool about it is it becomes this siting location because it happens to be there and it's an innocuous thing. The other important thing about it is they happen to be in fairly equidistant intervals around the cities. So we did geomaps in many of the major cities, and we looked at where all these big bellies were located. Well, one thing that's clear, they're where all the people are, right, that want to be connected, number one. Two, there happen to be in locations where if you put in wireless connectivity, they collectively create a matrix of wireless connectivity in the city, which is kind of a cool attribute. So you're not always hunting down something to mount stuff to. Now, what's also nice there, and what we found on a project we're doing right now, we're in the verge right now of putting these things on the street in New York City, and it's part of a pilot that we've been working on to prove several things. One is what the technology can do, but two is how well it's received in the city. Because when you talk to the city organization, I always describe it as you've got the IT side of the organization, and then you have the art degrees, and both are important because the look and feel of the street and the leverage of this technology siting area can be a very important platform, advertising, notifications, etc. You can see on the left here. So what we essentially did is we said, let's go to every station where there's a waste can, and let's build what looks like a waste can that sits next to it. But really what it is a technology platform. And inside of it, we can put multiple technologies. We can put cellular. We can put in Wi-Fi technology. We can put in gunshot sensors. We can put in 360-degree camera monitoring systems. And a plethora of different types of technologies. And then as you populate these things, they create essentially this multi-technology mesh at the city level that kind of disappears in the city. You don't really see it. Because what we found in the early pilots is people walk by them and it just looks like it's part of the waste station, right? And they're branded and they fit in nicely to the city, as nicely as a waste can fit in. So really a natural extension of the waste and recycle stations. Key thing is that it eliminates active equipment. One of the challenges with cellular technology is you have to put gear there. I think you were talking earlier, Peter, about the challenge between what I want in the city and what can be done with technology. And I find that as well. At some point I've had these discussions in New York about physics. At some point in time, delivering certain wavelengths around the city takes technology, and the math says you can't do it in the size of a pencil. So you have to get that balance between what you want to be able to deliver and what physics allows, right? And we've been able to consolidate that pretty nicely, and this solution has been pretty well received. But what's also important about it is that when you deliver this stuff today, a lot of times you'll see that there's actual, we call active equipment, electronics that they want to hang up on poles, right? And they run fiber and power up to the poles, and then that stuff will drive an antenna. If I have to service it, then what do I have to do? I have to plan to shut down part of that street. I have to roll in lift trucks. I have to get up to that equipment. It's very intrusive. The benefit of having equipment in a cabinet at the street level is I'm pretty much cordoning off a chunk of the sidewalk, and I can access all that active equipment. I can service it there. I can lock it up and go. So it really changes the maintenance concepts, because we do update and upgrade and change out this technology. You have to plan for that. The other thing that's nice about this approach is it's consistent, right? You can create a footprint, and that footprint pretty much looks the same no matter where you put it in the city. And even though you might change the technology in it slightly, the look and feel doesn't change. And you can go into locations, maybe you had IoT sensors in one area of the city, but you didn't need them in another as part of a plan. You can go into the next part of the city and add those IoT sensor capabilities pretty easily, right, without changing that infrastructure. So very extensible. The other part about this that we're working on is unleashing smart services. And services is important because those of us who have been in the business of building wireless connectivity, we are plumbers in some respects, right? We build pipes over the air to allow devices to connect and move data or move phone calls. And really our industry is going beyond that. It's going to a level where we're looking at that plumbing and saying, look, there's intelligence in there, and if we leverage some of that intelligence and make it available into the places it's deployed, that intelligence can be used to create a smarter environment. And that's where the power really starts to come out of the next generation technology. So, giving an example, a couple of those things. Smart services. One of them, and we talked a lot, public safety, FirstNet, if some of you are familiar with the government FirstNet initiative. Very important. And today, you know, dialing 911 is one thing. We got to get that right and go to the call centers. When I dial 911 and I'm very highly densified area, let's take a stadium, right? I'm in the middle of a stadium and I have a problem. I dial 911. PSAP is sending guys to an address with 80,000 people in it. How do I get to you? Now, my argument is you might be 50 meters or 50 yards away from somebody who's an EMT, doesn't even know you're dialing 911. So we're integrating technology into stadiums that allows you to not only call through to the PSAP, but also alert in-building public safety people immediately so that they know where you are in the stadium and they can get to you faster. Our belief is if I can integrate technology into highly densified areas that alerts local responders faster, I can probably save lives, all right, which is a critical factor. Studies show, crazy or not, that stadiums is one of the most likely places for people to have a heart attack. Never knew that before, but if we think of safety, this is one of the ways we can change it. Now, there's another flip side of that that says, what if you can use the technology to alert people? All of you at some point probably received on your phone this annoying thing called an Amber Alert, right? Phone goes off, nobody sent you a text, it beeps at you loudly, it sends you an Amber Alert. Or you received a notification that says something like there's flood warnings somewhere. These are an integrated part of the wireless infrastructure control network. It's built in. You don't get to control that to most parts. I can show you where that is in your phone so you can turn certain elements off. But it's built in for safety procedures. And there's new capabilities in your phones that we're leveraging into our technology that allow us to build more enhanced public safety response mechanisms in. So this is an example here. Here we are in Wacker Drive. Let's say that something bad is happening out on the street, and we've left here and we're out on that street. Well, what would really be powerful is the ability for the public safety team to respond and tell people in that particular area to go away from the emergency, right? The last thing you want to do is run into the gunshots. But let's face it, if gunshots are happening at the street level, it's hard to tell really where they're coming from. All you know is you want to get away from them. But how do you know you're going away from them? And we had scenarios, you know, unfortunately in places, in arenas where there were bombers and people were running out of the stadium, but they were running straight into where the bombers were. Nobody could notify them, okay? That's a grim picture of how we protect things. Even weather is another scenario, right? When you're in a large stadium, if you're in Soldier Field and a nasty storm or tornado comes ripping through, how do you get people into shelter in a very orderly fashion? Difficult to do today, right? I was at a game where all the signs just said take cover, and all I could tell my wife is the bar's closed. But so how does that work? So you'll notice on the screen here, I'm showing an example where the Public Safety Response Center can identify specific areas within the city. And in one case, I might tell people in the part of the city to go east of Wacker Drive. In the other part, I know they're west of Wacker Drive, and I tell them to go west. So that's one example of a way to leverage this technology. Let me try and show you a little demo here if I can make this work. So let me get this cursor on the screen here. Okay, so what you'll see here is this is 2 mobile phones. So it's actually a little piece of software that actually monitors a real mobile phone. And these 2 mobile phones are in different cells. Okay, so you're familiar with mobile technology, you have different cells. So they're in different cells inside of a stadium in this case. It could be different environments, but this is in a stadium. And then I have a portal, a tool here that allows responders to issue certain canned responses or ad hoc responses to those people. So I'll play this is a video capture of that initiative. So you'll see what happens is something's going on, so I initiate an emergency alert. In this case, a severe weather alert. I know that's hard to read, but it says stand by for further instructions to proceed to your sheltering area. Now, I have a mechanism that says, okay, it's getting bad, so I do my second alert, and it specifically tells the people in Bowl North on the left that I want them to go behind section 150. On the right, I show that I want them to go behind section 250. All right, so it's very orderly in what it tells them to do. And then once I have them out there, I can send another alert that says, okay, please stay where you're at in the sheltering location until further announcement. So I start to deliver these orderly messages or instructions on what we want you to do in the event of this emergency. Now, I may have a scenario where I got to do an ad hoc message. Something's happening in one part of the bowl that shouldn't be happening. I didn't really plan for it. You can plan for what things you want people to do if a storm comes in. If someone's running in one side of the bowl and they're going to do bad things, kind of hard to plan for. But you want a mechanism to start to give orderly responses to those people. So now you can do ad hoc things. And what you'll see there is the message only went to those people in the North Bowl and instructed them to immediately proceed to the north parking lot. Okay? But what I really want to show you here is you think of wireless technology as connectivity. This is integrated technology that's in the system today that we're now building applications for that allows us to leverage it to solve real business problems and real security or public safety problems with that technology. Let me show you one other variation of that. We all talk about parking as a pain in the grunt. So, how do you solve for that? Well, some of these IoT devices now are very simple, very low cost. The ability to embed them right in parking lots or parking spaces, and it suddenly becomes a mesh of intelligence, right? Because I know if there's a car there or not. If it's in areas where I can pre-allocate, I can pre-allocate. Number one frustration with sports stadiums, people don't go, parking is a pain, all right? And you've all been there when the gates open, it's a mad rush, you're trying to find a parking spot. You try and take public safety. If you do get in the parking spot, you have, some people with flags, just go that way. I don't know if there's a spot there or not. Think of it as being much smarter, and when you go in, you are pre-allocated a spot, and as you get up, it tells you to take a right turn and go to spot 23, because I know no other cars are there, I know it's available, and I pre-allocate it. Once it's gone, it's gone. I never have another car drive through that lane when it's full. right? So you can create intelligent systems that do that. If you go to the extreme, we were talking about autonomous vehicles. Today I have enough technology in some vehicles that they'll go park themselves for me. It's not unrealistic for us to be thinking about the ability for you to be headed to the game and your car takes over, drops you off at the parking entrance closest to your seats, and it's already pre-allocated a spot in the parking lot and your car parks itself. All right? Sounds crazy, but it's not unreasonable to think that, we're all going to see that easily. The cities is a common mechanism that ensures that all the different devices you use
either are contemplated or is the right one to serve a particular issue or service you try to provide. But that also provides a challenge if you try to look at this holistically. How do you accommodate all these different technologies, all the different services, and maybe even more importantly, what's going to happen in the future? You know, Todd mentioned 5G, but a lot of times people don't even know what 5G is. So how do you plan for it? How do you design for it when you really don't know exactly what it will look like? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well, because that's been kind of the life for us for the last 14 years or so. Working with mobile carriers where it's very similar, right? You look at a T-Mobile versus a Verizon, very different expectation, and the technologies they want to deploy has also been different, and they certainly haven't told us what they're planning to do in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So a little bit about Extenet. Like I said, we're headquartered in Lisle, so about 25 miles west of here. But we are nationwide. We have networks across the country. We design, build, own, and operate the infrastructure. So we actually make the investments in the infrastructure, and then we add the various carriers on it over time. We do networks both from an outdoor perspective and indoor perspective, like Todd mentioned. And you talk about dense networks. That's truly, what our business look like. And we'll go through some of the networks we've built, and we see and understand when people talk about dense network, what does that really mean? We operate a NOC out of our headquarters in Lisle, and has service level agreements with all of the carriers, and also with building owners. We have NOC connectivity. In the outdoor environment, we haven't done as much in terms of operational agreements with municipalities, but we see that obviously with all the initiatives going on, a natural progression. We are the largest independent provider of these type of networks in the US. Just to give you a little bit sense of the size of the company, we recapitalized the business back in late 2015, and that recapitalization was worth $1.4 billion.
Mark Gansey loves you guys.
Of course he does. And we've been in business since 2002, just to kind of get a little bit of sense. And our view of the deployments we're doing is very long term. These are big capital investments that we are making, and then making the bet that over time we'll make the return and get the revenue to support the investment we make. Just some of the networks that we have across the nation, mix of indoor, outdoor. You mentioned some sports venues, when the Trump Tower here, a lot of other buildings in Chicago. But again, typically in major metropolitan areas, but we also have some business actually in the rural markets, and same thing throughout Illinois, and actually some of the smaller communities out there. We have outdoor networks to provide outdoor service, where it's sometimes been challenging to provide cellular service in a traditional manner. Just want to show you, I said densification. This is just a snapshot of our network in Manhattan. All of those blue dots are people call it small cells, or we call it distributed nodes. The red squares are various indoor networks, and the orange lines are fiber. It's our fiber. We have, in this situation, well over 800 strands of fiber represented in those orange lines there. So we have a massive amount of fiber. It's a grid, and this is to connect all the sites that either could be, like you Phil explained, a big belly type site. But more traditionally, so far for us, has been a street lamp, utility pole, those type of infrastructure that are common throughout the area. And then we're in buildings like Empire State Building and others throughout the city. San Francisco, kind of same thing, thousands and thousands of node locations. And the densest fiber footprint out there, and it's been built over the last 5 years. So it's primed to kind of this hyper-connected services, whatever that might be, either from a city perspective or from an enterprise perspective. We have our infrastructure that's set up to do that. Chicago, we don't own this network. We redesigned and built it for the Chicago Transit Authority.
Thank you.
Yeah. A few others here were part of that. And again, it's important. If you look at the performance that people have on the L today, or in the subway, it's outstanding. They're getting 70, 80 megabit per second. And again, same type of methodology when we went in and said, okay, how do we design this? We need to accommodate all the various carriers. How do we make sure that we could deploy in that environment, which is not trivial? Working with, obviously, the CTA, the city, the various carriers, and accommodate that on a common converged network. And that's what we do. And for this way, if each of the carriers try to do this by themselves, one, they couldn't afford it. Number two, it will be a nightmare for CTA and everybody that is riding the CTA just because of the interruption. The trains are running 24/7. So those are good examples of, not only the economic and the technology side, but actually the practical elements of deploying it. And that's the same thing in most cities, right? You try to go in and put in an infrastructure, and if you need to come back 3-4 times, that's interrupting the rest of the city. So we try to kind of put in the infrastructure once, but we also know that it's going to evolve, so we need to kind of be smart about how do we do that. So kind of how we look at it, this is just an example of kind of both the indoor and outdoor network, where we have basically the three fundamentals of our business is we need sites or places to put, and if it's a wireless connectivity, where we'll have the radiation points. But it could also be that it's actually connecting directly to a service. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically you need that endpoint. Then you need connectivity to all those endpoints. To Todd's point earlier, we talk about massive amount of bandwidth, gigabit plus. So we need good connectivity to those locations. It's not only that they actually provide you the signal, but they need to be able to haul that traffic back to the rest of the network. And that's the hub segregation point, where do you bring that traffic back? So you could hand it off, or you could do process it, and it's specifically, like I mentioned earlier, if it's any type of intelligence or any type of analytics you want to do, maybe on a more localized basis, that could either be done in the hub, or you could have similar aggregation points within the buildings based on what type of granularity you're looking at from a computing perspective. So when we look at this is, we say, okay, those are the three elements that we need, independent of who's using the network. And then we layer those services on top of that network. Doesn't mean that every customer, they need to use all the elements of that network, which is one of the things that people talk about neutral host, and they come to us and say, look, I have the perfect product. It has all the bands and everything and all the capabilities. Or if you take in the smart city environment, you have this integrated solution that's doing everything from gunshot detection to environmental sensing, and it has cameras, everything in it. But that might not always be the ideal solution, because you don't need the same density of cameras as you need for environmental sensing or other applications. Same thing how it applied to us in the mobile world, where a Verizon is focusing on maybe enterprises and want to have a certain density and a certain amount of capacity in the network in around businesses. where T-Mobile is more focused on maybe suburban markets and the more of a residential type service. And when Metro PCS was around, they were focused on specific demographics that they were addressing. And so we're looking at it is that not on all of these poles do we need to have all the carriers, but we have the capabilities to add them. And that was, Todd mentioned earlier with the Big Bell is like, yeah, you have the ability in a modular fashion to add services over time. And we think about, 5G and all of those other acronyms have out there, we want to be able to add them when they're ready and it's a business case to support. So that just give you kind of a little bit of idea of how we think about deploying these type of networks. It's not like one size fits all. So we look at, okay, what's the backbone, what's the bare minimum that we need to put in place, and a lot of times maybe what's costly to put in and have a high labor cost, make sure that we do that once, and the stuff that has maybe a not as high labor cost, but has a more higher equipment cost or variability in terms of the functionality of what we're deploying, we could deploy that later on. And what's even more interesting when those type of things start becoming implemented in software, now we could actually put in servers and then update the functionality without even having to send people out there in the field. So just an example, using a street lamp in this case, we'll build a fiber network, have the sites built out with antennas and all of the other infrastructure from both a power and fiber perspective. And we build that typically for our carrier. We are not like sitting around waiting and getting all 4 carriers, yeah, I'm gonna go on this network. As soon as we have an anchor service, we're going to build a network. We know that we're not making the return on that investment, but over time, we're making the bet that we're going to get additional services on. So additional carriers could either go in the same box, depends on, or it could be in the big belly if that was the case. But we need to add additional capabilities traditionally. What we've done in some cases is actually add cameras and capabilities for the municipalities, but on a limited basis. But I think that is a model that really makes sense because now that additional cost and time to add those services, because the backbone is already in place. We're looking at adding a camera, adding sensors, adding those capabilities to the network. So a little bit of kind of the lesson learned is it's almost like in real estate, footprint. If you have the footprint, it's a lot of different things you could do. And I think for smart cities, the same apply. If you only are covering a small little area, it's not as valuable as if you have a network like I showed you in Manhattan or San Francisco, where you could really apply these services across a larger area. But to be able to do that, it's not only say that you're covering that area, you need to have a very dense infrastructure that gives you the flexibility and the ability to really provide the services that you're looking to do. And we've seen that over and over again with the carriers as well. When we have the footprint, they will typically come to us and say, look, I have these needs in this particular area, could you help me? Don't try to boil the ocean. So the point here is, and we saw this early in a business where we were looking at, okay, we need to get 2 or 3 carriers who want to get on the network at the same time, and hopefully they have about the same requirements. Didn't work, right? And the same thing in the smart cities is like, you look at all these different applications, they have different characteristics and requirements. So rather than try to do it all at once, figure out the ones that has the greatest value and that you can kind of start as the anchor. And then look at, okay, what are the common things that could be used by others, But at least you could get off the ground, get that anchor service in place, and then you could add those other ones, because now the thresholds to do it is so much smaller. And so that's, I think it's another part of the thinking, and that's where we see maybe some of the struggles, at least from our perspective, smart city initiatives have had. They try to do too much too quickly. Flexibility and modularity is worth gold. You mentioned it. I think that's just the nature of technology, and how you need to think about it is, I don't know everything today that's going to happen next year, or definitely not the following year. So how do I make sure that, based on how I deploy my infrastructure, I have that flexibility and the modularity to add various services? You mentioned like a test track or test area. If we have the infrastructure in a particular area, adding those capabilities is typically not that complicated. If you have to go in and say, look, I'm going to make the investment to put in that test track, and knowing that I'm working with startups that might not have the money to do it, it's becoming a very difficult proposition to do. So again, being able to add some of those services that have different both economics and technology requirements over time is valuable. Which kind of leads me to the next one, is economics wins. We could talk about all the cool technology, and Todd did a really good job of it, but if you don't have a business plan or a business model to support it, it's just going to be talk. And so that's really what I like. I like where do we find those intersection points between technology and business models? And then, if you have a good business model, how do I find a technology to support it? Or if it's a technology, is there ways we could apply business models or business models around it? So that's obviously another element. And then just kind of looking back, I've been with Exynos since, believe it or not, 2004. You're very kind of energetic, and we're going to conquer the world, we're going to make a difference. Things take time, right? And a lot of times you overestimate what you could do in the short term. But then when I'm looking back now and say, holy cow, 1.4 billion, didn't expect that when I joined the company back in 2004. So, then you kind of exceeded what your expectations were, but it was a lot of hard work to get there. And I think this is, same situation. It's complicated, and it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of parties that are part of it, and so it will take some time. And you need to be resilient and stay with it.
I hope they gave you some good warrants when you joined in 2004.
I wish I did better when I, So again, just kind of recap a little bit. We talked about all the various technologies. And now I'll actually start the presentation going through all this. And these are technologies and interest groups that really kind of making up both IoT and
You're going to put the dense networks in the middle there next?
It's coming right now, the flash. You had to do something, right? So basically, the point is, the technology to some extent doesn't really matter as much. As far as we get the right network architecture in place, we could accommodate a lot of these technologies. And that's, my spiel about 5G. So your thing is kind of the same. Is with those requirements, it's the architecture that's going to determine if you're going to get the performance. You're going to get gigabits, but if you don't have the density in your network, it's not going to happen. Same thing with latency. If the network is not architected the right way, you could have whatever standard they call it in LTE, advanced or 5G technology, doesn't going to give you the performance. And it's the same thing with all these smart city type deployments. That density is critical, and the connectivity and having the right architecture. So with that said, that's kind of how we look at it, is start looking at the architecture and the network behind it, And then you could do a lot of these cool things over time. So thank you, and looking forward to the panel.
Kumar, you hit it right on the head there. I think that's what it basically comes down to. Wow. Hey, everybody. We have seats for you. What we're going to do now is we're going to take about a 5 to 8 minute break. We're going to have these folks join us at tables, and then they're going to come around, they're going to take your food order, and there'll be an appetizer served, and then we'll have a panel discussion from our business appetizer.
That was
Can you do it?
It's actually an Irish name, but it's like Peggy.
Oh.
Where are you from?
Excellent.
Excellent.
So I talked to a lot of colleagues.
Good,
Yeah, great meetings, right?
Yeah, October 10th and 11th.
So you'll be there?
Yeah, I'll be there. And back when I worked with Tracy back then at our school. And so we know each other way back. And
Where are you based out of?
I'm here in Chicago. So I just started with WIA. Yeah, so I've replaced Lisa Butler. I've been
Oh, so you're the one.
yeah, so I'm the new event salesperson. And
Lisa, we would always excel for the last stuff here, I think, sponsoring your reception.
Great.
Lisa was always the one kind of leading that.
I'm technical.
I saw her in May at the Royal City Show.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you saying hi. So yeah, we'll be there. Taking this to the road, and now the concept called Connect X. And it really fits into the what we're talking about here, is everything's connected, and you never have to listen.
So we know it.
Yeah. And we're trying to just bring a new show concept out here.
Yeah, there we go.